All right. I think we should be live. All right. I think we're live. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Happy Sunday. Hope you're all doing well and you are safe and happy wherever you are in the world today. And I want to thank you for joining me in this session. I'm honored to be with you as I am every week, to be here with you in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And I look forward to sharing time with you in our shared sacred space today. So the things we want to do today in our sacred space, we'll follow the usual kind of schedule here, which is we'll go ahead and set sacred space right at the beginning. And I'll start that in a moment. And then we will have our overall topic for the week. And this week, the topic we have chosen is the power of reflection and the role of ancestors. The power of reflection and the role of ancestors. So we'll have a short exercise after that, and then we will close sacred space. So we will go ahead and start sacred space now. Let me just make sure everything's working. Okay. And in opening sacred space, I will start by saying that what we would like to do here together in our time is to create a space which is devoid of fear, threat, and control, in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we define that, right? So it's not me or anybody else telling you what to do, but it's guidance that you're getting from within as you choose to accept it. So it could be flashes of brilliant insight. It could be a muse that you feel guides you. It could be any kind of like intuitive, inspiration. A safe sanctuary space for us all to be able to relax and surrender with no feeling of danger or threat, so that we can partake of the emotional nourishment and spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. And in opening sacred space today, I will propose, as I do every week, that we all follow the 4 principles of proceeding sacred space. Number 1 is confidentiality. So standard Vegas rules, what happens in sacred space stays in sacred space. Now, because we're online and the stream is public, the replay will be public, the way we handle confidentiality here is via anonymization. So if you would like to be anonymous, you don't have to be anonymous. But if you would like to be, you would come into the Crowdcast stream, go into edit profile, and then edit your username to be whatever you want, your initials or Mickey Mouse or Harry Potter, and then click save and then come back in, and then you can continue chatting and participating, asking questions under that anonymized username. And you don't have to chat, you don't have to participate, and we'll get to that in a moment. The second principle is no threat or controlling, no fixing, no tough love. So even if it's well-intentioned, well, I'm only trying to make a helpful suggestion, right? We refrain from doing that, not because it's bad. And again, when we say sacred and profane, profane is not bad. Profane is just profane. In exactly the same way where we say they're salty and they're sweet. Now, sweet is not bad. Sweet is just sweet. But you don't necessarily want 99% sweet all the time, right? You want your own blend, and you can choose that. And in exactly the same way, there's nothing wrong with tough love intrinsically. There's nothing wrong with intervening or making recommendations or suggestions. But because those are intrinsically of the nature, of the provenance of fear and threat and control, however well-meaning, right? You need to do this even though you're afraid because it's good for you. Because how are you going to break through to your next spiritual development breakthrough if you don't suffer now, right? That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But because of the physics of it, because it relies on threat, we instantly get pitched back into the realm of the profane, which is the realm of fear, threat, and control, right? No, not morally bad, not unhealthy necessarily, but just the realm of fear, threat, and control. So we refrain from doing that here because in the sacred, there are certain things you can do only when you're in the sacred. just like there are certain things you can only do when you're in the profane. So here for an hour or two every week, we're like, okay, we just want to soak in the hot tub of the sacred to refill with the nutrients we can get only in the sacred. And that's why we refrain from that. We are here to hold space for each other, to be however we are, afraid, anxious, happy, relaxed, however we are, and to be okay with that, and to just hold space for you to be like that. And even the next, sort of second order derivative beyond that. So I'm anxious, but I feel incompetent that I'm feeling anxious, or I'm anxious and I'm feeling righteous indignation that I'm anxious, right? However you feel about however you feel, we hold space for that too. We allow you to be however you are, because we're in a realm of no fear, threat, and control. Okay. The third principle is a corollary, which is no commerce. Right. So because of everything I've explained, no fear, threat, or control, nothing may be sold right in this space. So I cannot sell you anything. Gowrie, my editor in Bangalore, who will be on screen in a moment, cannot sell you anything. Please refrain from selling things to each other in the chat and other ways you may connect during sacred space. And so this includes things you may recommend. Oh, there's a great book by so-and-so. There's a great workshop by so-and-so you should look into. Have you looked into this system? Have you looked into that system? We ask that you refrain from doing that. Even if you're recommending my stuff, please refrain from doing that. Because even a recommendation is a form of tough love, is fear, threat, and control, where look into this. And my feeling is, oh, well, I respect you, you're great. And if you tell me to look into it, I better look into it, or else. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what we do here in this space. We want to keep the waters of the spring of the sacred very pure, so we can fully get our refill of energy from the sacred, and then kind of be released and get on with our day and into the next week. We are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. We are here for what you are, not for what you do or provide. We're not here for your value add. We are here for your presence. And the third principle is no expectation of participation. So in keeping with all this, there's no, the fourth principle, there's no pressure to do anything. You can chat, you can not chat, you can ask questions, you can not ask questions. You can come and go as you please. You don't need to say, oh, sorry, I need to leave early. Just come and go as you please. It's totally okay. We are here for you and each other, right? The nourishment comes from the held space and your presence and attention. Again, from what you are, not from what you do or provide. And all of us here together will tend to amplify that effect, right, in a very beautiful and delicious way. So this is what I propose. And if you're not okay with that, that's totally okay, right? There's no fear, threat, or control to whip you into coming to sacred space or staying to sacred space because it's sacred space, right? So if you are not okay with it, that's totally cool. We will now just pause to give everyone a moment to make their selection as to whether they would like to stay or withdraw from the group. And if you withdraw, that's fine. We'll still catch up with you later in profane space and still hang out and have a coffee, right? No worries at all. Okay. So I'll give you a moment to dial that in and make your selection. Okay. And now for the rest of us, we will now move forward together into our shared sacred space. And as we cross the threshold now together into our shared sacred space, I will just remind everyone that we would like to now observe the four principles of sacred space: confidentiality / anonymization, no fear, threat, or control, no tough love, no intervening, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. All right. Welcome to Sacred Space, everyone. Happy Sunday. Hope you've had a good week. This is certainly one of the best parts of my week. And so now we're back again for another session, our 56th session of Weekly Sacred Space. And our topic this week will be the power of reflection and the role of ancestors. So in my weekly brainstorm session call with Gowrie, my editor, who is based in Bangalore, we came to confront the power of deep inner reflection and then also the way we relate to our ancestors, and the power of both reflection and our ancestors in our lives, in our life paths. So, what role do our ancestors play in our life paths, if any? And what role do they play in helping us discover our bliss and our sort of true meaning and purpose in life? Right? How do we consult our ancestors for wisdom and guidance? And then, on the other hand, in addition, right, how does inner reflection help us in connecting with our ancestors? Okay. So, in order to dive into this, we will read a folktale this week from the African tradition from Zimbabwe. And we will start with that story. Gary will read that story for us, and then we will let the golden thread lead us forward from there. So Gary, if you are there, please come on up.
Hi, Artie.
Hello. Hi, Gary. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Hi.
Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
All right. So, tell us, if you would, about the story you've selected.
So we've finally, I think, moved on from the long, cycle of Greek stories that we were picking. And
for now.
It'll come back up again sometime, I'm sure. And so this time there's a folk tale that I saw from, again, Andrew Lang's extensive collection of fairy tales and folk tales from across the world. And this one's, it was given as Rhodesian folk tale. So it was collected quite a while ago, right, by Andrew Lang. So it's now Zimbabwe. So this is sure a folk tale from their tradition. And I'm really excited because I've never picked a story from African folk tales. So this is quite new.
So we are circumambulating too. Too.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Would you tell us the story?
Yeah. So,
all right.
So the story itself starts with saying that this goes back quite long way away. And so this was way before the white men were ever even seen in this region. And there lived a man, and his name was Gopani Kufa. And the story is about the extraordinary set of events that happened in his life. So one day, Gopani Kufa was out hunting, and he came upon a strange sight. There was this enormous python which had caught an antelope, and it had coiled itself around it like pythons do, right? And the antelope was kicking and striking out in despair with its legs and its horns. It was trying its best to wriggle out and escape. And while it was doing that, its horns got stuck in the tree next to the tree where this was happening. And the horns kind of pinned, while they were stuck, they pinned the python's neck to the tree. So that, and the horns got deeply sunk into the soft wood, that now both the python and the antelope were stuck, and neither could get away, right? And the antelope cried out for help. I wasn't doing any harm to anyone. I've been caught, and had I not defended myself this way, I would have been eaten, and now I'm stuck. Help me, somebody. And then, the man walked up, and he was just staring at this whole picture in front of him, this strange kind of thing that happened. And the python called out to him as well. He said, help me, I'm Insatu, I'm king of all the reptiles, and if you help me, I will reward you well. So Gopani Kufa looked at the whole thing, he considered for a moment, and then he decided to stab the antelope with his dagger, and he set the python free. And the python said, oh, thank you so much. I will reward you just as I promised. Come back here with the new moon, and I shall have eaten the antelope, and then I will reward you. And the antelope was still dying, and, kind of desperate at the last breath, said, yeah, of course, he will reward you, and your reward shall be your own undoing. And saying that, it died. So Gopanikufa then went back to his village. And when it was new moon, he returned to the same spot where he had saved the python. And the python was now lying upon the ground, still very sleepy, still digesting the huge meal he had had. And then he saw the man, he thanked him again and said, come with me now. I'll take you to my country, and I will give you what you want, anything you want, of all my possessions. And this man was at first afraid, and he thought, this antelope had warned me. Should I really follow this python into his world, wherever that is? But later he decided, might as well try it. So he finally consented, and he followed Insato, the python, into the forest. And they traveled for several days. And at last, they came to a hole leading deep into the earth. And that hole wasn't very wide, but it was just large enough to let a man in. And then Insato said, hold on to my tail. I will go down first, and I'll draw you after me. Right, so the man did that, and the python entered into the hole. And down, 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 they went for days, all the while, getting deeper and deeper into the earth. Until at last, the darkness ended, and they dropped down into a beautiful country. And there was this short green grass all around. There were herds of cattle and sheep and goats, and in the distance, there was a great big houses everywhere. The roofs were all made of gold. And this man, Gopanikufa, was so shocked by what he saw that he turned to look at the python. And what's even more shocking was that in the place of the python was a man. He was strong and handsome and well-built. And the snake's skin, the python's skin, was now wrapped around him. And he had, rings and necklaces of pure gold. He had all gold all over him. And the man smiled at him and I said, I am Insato. In my own country, I take man's shape. And this is my land. And he took Gopanikufa by the hand and he led him towards his town. They passed, rivers where men and women were fishing and boating. And as they went on, there were fields of rice and maize, there were farmers. And as they passed everyone, the people just, bowed down to Insato, waved at him. And Insato said, well, these are my children. And Gopanikufa, all of this while, was just astonished at everything he saw. They came to the town, they came closer to the houses, and they came close to the palace. Even the grains of dust in the streets were made of gold. And then he took him into the palace, showed him his rooms, showed him, the servants who would wait on him, and told him that they would have a great big feast to celebrate their arrival that night. And the next morning, he could then name his choice of the riches from everything that he had seen so far, and it will be given to him. And saying that, he left. And now Gopanikufa was just stunned at everything he had seen. What would he ask? Right? And so he drew out this little basket that he carried with him. He opened the basket and he took out a wasp that he carried in the basket. And this was not an ordinary wasp, right? The wasp was called Zengimizi, and it was the spirit of Gopanikufa's father. And it was exceedingly wise. And in times of doubt, Gopanikufa always consulted the wasp as to what he should do. So on this occasion, he took it out of the basket and he asked, "What gift should I ask of Insato tomorrow? What kind of reward should I ask for?" And the wasp hummed for a little while and said, "Ask him for Sipao, the mirror." And it flew back into the basket. And the man was astonished because he didn't know what it meant. And he didn't know why. It didn't make any sense. But he decided to go ahead with it anyway. So after the feast, in the morning when Insato came to meet Gopanikufa and told him that I've now come to give you your reward, just name your choice. Gopanikufa said, "O king, out of all your possessions, I just want one thing. I will have Sipao, the mirror." And the king was shocked. He said, "Oh, my dear friend, ask me anything, but I didn't think that you would request for one thing that is most precious to me. Please, please not the mirror." Now, because Gopanikufa didn't exactly know what it was he was asking, he thought maybe I could ask for something else, but then I don't know. So he said, "Well, let me think it over then, and I'll let you know tomorrow if I change my mind." And the king left and he looked really troubled because this mirror, Sipao as it was called, had magic powers. And whoever owned it had to just ask and every wish would be fulfilled. And to this mirror, Insato owed everything that he possessed. He was king of this amazing land because of the mirror. All the riches and the gold and everything was because of the mirror, right? And now it would be taken from him. So no wonder he looked troubled. So as soon as the king left, Gopanikufa went back to his basket, took the wasp out, and asked again, "Well, the king seems loath to grant my request. Is there anything else which is of equal value for which I might ask?" And the wasp said, "There's nothing in the world which is of such value as this mirror. Because it is a wishing mirror and it accomplishes the desires of him who owns it. So if the king hesitates, you go back to him the next day and the day after and the next day. And in the end, he will give the mirror to you because you saved his life." And so it was that. For 3 days, Gopanikufa kept going back to the king with the same answer. And finally, the king, with tears in his eyes, gave him the mirror and said, "Take the mirror and may all your wishes come true. And if you want to go back home, the mirror will show you the way." And so Gopanikufa was so happy. And he took the mirror and said, "Take me back on earth again." Instantly found himself standing on the upper ground, but he didn't know where exactly he was. So he again said to the mirror, "Take me back to the path to my own village." And there he was, right on the path to the village. And when he arrived home, he found his wife and daughter mourning for him because they thought he had been eaten by lions, or he was dead by now. It had been days since he left. And he comforted them, and he told them that he followed a wounded antelope, he lost his way, wandered for a long time before he found the path back again. So he didn't tell them about all his adventures, right? And he settled down for the night. Before going to sleep, he pulled out the wasp again And he asked the wasp, "What do you think I should ask for next?" And the wasp hummed for a little and said, "Would you not like to be as great a chief as Insato?" And Gopanikufa smiled. And he took the mirror and said to it, "Sipao, I want a town as great as that of Insato, and I want to be chief of that town." So all along the banks of the Zambezi River, where his village was, there sprang up streets of, stone buildings, roofs of gold, and there was rice fields and maize fields and cattle going to pasture everywhere. It just suddenly sprung up. There was a beautiful town there. And in the morning when Gopanikufa walked through the town, everyone hailed him as chief. And he became as powerful as Insato, the king of the reptiles. And his family moved into a palace. And his wife was just too astonished to ask any questions, to find out what was going on. But his daughter felt that something was up. There was some kind of secret that her father wasn't telling her. So she kept begging him to tell her how this had happened. How did he become so great all of a sudden? And finally, he revealed the whole secret to her. He told her about his journey, his adventure, and about the mirror. And then he had this thought. He gave her the mirror to her care and said, "Well, you know what? I think it will be safer with you because you have a separate, section in the palace. Your dwellings are a separate part of the building. And men keep coming into the palace to consult me all the time. So if it's with me, it might get stolen anytime, but with you, it'll be safe. So why don't you keep it?" So the daughter took the magic mirror, hid it beneath her pillow. And after that, for many years, Gopanikufa ruled over the town, over his people. He was wise, he ruled well, and everybody loved him. And never once did he ever need to ask the mirror to grant him a wish. And never once did he have to consult, the wasp, his ancestor. So everything was fine until, by the time his hair was turning gray, there came white men to the country. They came up the Zambezi and they fought long and fiercely with Gopanikufa soldiers, trying to take his town. But because of the power of the magic mirror, he beat them every time. Until finally, the chief of the white man's army called his servant and he said, "There is something that gives him this kind of power. And I want to know what that is." So he sent his, trusted servant to go to the town and find out what that secret was. So the servant dressed himself in rags. He set out. He came to Gopanikufa's town. He asked for the chief. So the people took him. And he bowed before him and he said, "Oh, chief, please take pity on me. I have no home. When, my army marched into your town, I alone stood apart. I didn't want to fight you because you're such a great man. You have great power. And I knew it would be useless to fight against you. So I stood apart. And now I've been thrown out. And I have nowhere to go." And Gopanikufa believed the story. So he took him in and he feasted him and he gave him a house. And this is how the end came. Because his daughter fell in love with this man. And from her, he learned the secret of the magic mirror. And one night, when everyone was asleep, he felt beneath her pillow and he found the mirror there. He immediately stole it, fled back to his army, and he gave it to his chief. And, nobody even realized that it was gone. So it came that one day, as Gopanikufa was looking at the river from his window, he saw these war canoes of white men. And the moment he saw them, he was afraid. And he called to his daughter. He said, "Go, fetch me the mirror, because, the white man's army is here." And she started to cry. And she said, "Oh, my father, the mirror's gone because this traitor that I loved stole the mirror from me." And, this was a crisis situation. So Gopanikufa then went and reached out to the wasp. And he said, "Oh, spirit of my father, what shall I do now?" And the wasp said, "Well, there is nothing now that can be done, because the words of the antelope are being fulfilled." And the chief said, "Well, I'm an old man now. That was years ago. I don't remember what the antelope said. What did it say?" And the wasp said, "Well, the words of the antelope, its dying words, were that your reward shall be your undoing. And that's what's being fulfilled." And the white man's army then fell on the people of the town and defeated them and then overpowered them. And since then, all the power of the earth has rested in the hands of the white men, because they have in their possession the magic mirror. So that's the story. Artie, would you like to come back on? Don't know if you're there. I see you now. Hi. I can't hear you though.
Can you hear me?
No sound. Yeah, I can hear
No
you
sound?
now.
Oh, okay, great.
I can hear you now.
Thank you for that story. So beautiful.
Thank
you. So I'll ask my usual question. So where do you enter into that story? Where does that story strike you the most?
Yeah, so when the story started, it went like any other kind of a Panchatantra story that I'm used to in the Indian tradition, where man walks in a forest and there are animals who ask for help, and then the man needs to decide who he would help. There's that motif that is like any kind of a regular folktale, right? And then this magical animal turns out to be this shapeshifter who takes him to another realm, another world. All of that was familiar in a way. Right. And then suddenly I'm taken aback when, out of nowhere, he pulls out this basket and a wasp, and it's an ancestor, and he asks for advice. And at that moment, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, that's what you would do. But then I don't remember to consult my ancestors as much as I'd like.
Right.
And this
reminder,
right? It's such a lovely reminder that here you are being offered anything on earth, anything in the world at all. There's so many riches and everything that you would want on any normal day. And think of your ancestor. For me, that's, I think, amazing, because we normally think of asking for help when we're in trouble. But here's an example where he's being offered everything under the sun, and then that's when he thinks of his ancestor.
I love that.
So, I really loved it. That was the point of the story when I really got hooked.
Yeah, I feel that. It's a very deep, I mean, we in the modern world don't even think of ancestors at all. And then when we do, they're at shrines, there's someone we go to sort of pay obligation. But this feeling of like having them with you all the time, and then literally like stopping to confer and like buzz, like at a trial or something, or at a game, you like have a huddle and you plan your next move, is this much more intimate kind of feeling of being with your ancestor and consulting with them.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I agree. I love this story. Thank you. And thanks to your muse for bringing it to us. This is just such a gorgeous story. We could do, as I was saying on our call, right? We could do several sessions on just this story.
Yeah.
And so the whole fairy tale, to me, on top of any other insights we may gain from it, is gorgeous precisely because it is like this beautiful example of the pattern of circumambulation, right?
Right.
Because when I talk about circumambulation, I'm just shorthanding it. I'm like, healing and bliss, they go back and forth. You heal for a while, then you're liberated. I have all my powers assembled around me. And then we start looking for trouble, right? We start looking to see what our bliss is, our meaning and purpose in life. And then we shift to the other leg. The other leg swings forward as we're walking forward, and we do bliss.
Right.
And bliss goes forward, and then we do our bliss so much and so well. We're like laughing on the battlefield, right? And then we hit another wall. And we can stop there or we can push through, and then we swing back into healing, right? So this constant back and forth is circumambulation, right? The labyrinth, the sort of classical labyrinth, the Chart labyrinth patterns are all archetypes of this. Anyway, what I love about this story is that the way I always shorthand it for a modern kind of audience is, the path of life is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Just to give everyone a more familiar idea. But that never quite does it justice. Because the pattern is not simply linear forward and then back. It is actually circular. And the pattern is a spiral flowing up into the center and then out into the next spiral, right? Onward and onward forever, like the ocean waves, right? The cyclicality, the eternalness, right, of the pattern is not a flaw. It is a blessing. And so you can almost think of it in terms of like the labyrinth image. You go in, you finally make it to the center of the labyrinth. And where do you go from there? Right? There are 2 options. One is at the center of the labyrinth, and this is more the spiritual enlightenment kind of path, right? And neither is good or bad, they're just different. You reach the center of the labyrinth. There's a trapdoor there. You sit there long enough, right? You reach the center of the labyrinth. There's a trapdoor. It opens up, and you go all the way down. And you leave the circular world into the world of, there are no words for it, right? The wordless world. So in meditation and enlightenment, where you escape the circular world, and this can be done. It's perfectly doable. But then the larger question, even before you've experienced it, but the larger question is, why would you do it, right? Why would you do it? If you could do it and leave this world, and you could, why would you? Because it begs the question of, if I can leave so straightforwardly, right? Why am I here in the first place? Right? Why are we here? Right? It's a very delicious question. The other approach then, when you reach the center of the labyrinth, is to, there are many ways to describe it, but one way is, like when you're at like Chartres in France, like an hour outside of Paris, and you're actually circumambulating this labyrinth that has been there since a little bit before 1200 AD, right? You reach the center, and then you turn around, and you come back out, right? You come back the way you came. But because you're turned around and coming back out and not going in, you are circumambulating a mirror image, a reflected Sapao mirror image of the first circumambulation. Another way of saying it is, you go into the center of the labyrinth, and instead of escaping through the trapdoor, you turn around and you go through another circumambulation, right? And life is like that, right? You finish one roller coaster adventure and you nail it, right? And then you begin the next roller coaster adventure. And you're like, well, how come? I thought at the end of this I'd be done. I'd cross the finish line and all my troubles will be gone. And this is I'm not as familiar with Zimbabwean sort of tribal sort of tradition and culture. But the sort of, I'm more familiar with, let's say, Dagara, sort of West African culture, right? But there is this general feeling that I'm familiar with, that I've been sort of, that has been explained to me, where it's like you finish one roller coaster adventure, and then you start the next, not as a punishment, but because you faced that first level of trouble, it almost qualifies you for the next higher, even more difficult and even more terrifying level of trouble, right? And you do this willingly. You do this willingly. Okay. Said another way, the kind of sensibility here is that the pursuit of a life free of trouble is not per se the goal, right? Because, I mean, just look at the larger pattern of where we are in this life. You were born to begin with, right? I mean, just being born puts you already at risk, because the minute you're born, you can die, right? And you didn't have to be born. You could just be floating around somewhere, but you came into this like arena, this game level, this game field, presumably for a reason, right? And you can play it a number of different ways, where you're like the antelope, innocent. I have no idea. I wasn't doing anything. I'm just minding my own business. I didn't choose to be born. I'm just an innocent little cork victim floating on the ocean of, like, you know, samsara or whatever. Woe is me. Somebody get me out of here, right? You can do that if you want. But the reason you can do that, if you want, is because this is your roller coaster ride, right? You choose the roller coaster. Another way of looking at it is, the minute you walk into a movie theater, there's risk. You don't know if you will laugh or cry, be entertained, be terrified. But what you do know is the worst thing that can happen is that you will be bored. The boringest movies are the ones where nothing bad happens and everything just goes along. You're just staring at a window, with, you know, the curtains fluttering in the breeze for 2.5 hours, right? And you're like, I didn't pay for this. I want some action. I want some adventure. I want some risk, some surprise. That's in the movie. Even sitting in your seat, you know, the popcorn could be stale. All kinds of things could happen, right? And the point is, you pay for that. Right? And you can play it any way you want. You can pay for it. You go in and you're like, oh, I'm such a victim. I can't believe I have to watch this crappy movie. Or you can pay for the ticket just to get in and be the rascal and sneak back out in the middle of the movie, right? Or, you know, pull the fire alarm and make everybody run out in a fright, right? But the point is that whatever it is you choose to do, however you choose to play the adventure of your life, you paid to be there. Okay. So here, let's look at the circumambulation that happens. It's a gorgeous pattern that is traced out in the narrative arc of the story. When the story opens, and just to pause and give a quick thumbnail of how we read these stories to folks who may be new to live sacred space or new to the way we do healing here. The way we read these stories is that we read them mythopoetically, which simply means that when you read a story, you regard every major actor as a symbol of a different part of your own inner self, right? And then that's the starting position. You hit the play button, you let the video unspool, and then you look out for, you make notes on like who's doing what to whom, who's above, who's below, who's crossing realms into the underground, into the upper realm. And then you kind of take meaning from that. And ideally, you don't read it allegorically, which is like, so the moral of the story is, when an antelope and a python are in a fight, leave them alone, right? That's not the moral of the story anyway. Where it's like a fear, threat, and control. So you better do this in the future. Rather, you read it not allegorically, but symbolically, mythopoetically, where you read it for insights into the physics of how the clock works of circumambulation happens, right? So you can take these insights as talismans and protective amulets for yourself when you are in the labyrinth of your own circumambulation, which every single one of you is right now. And you can take the insight of these physics so that when you see something happen in your own world, you're like, okay, this looks familiar. I've seen this before. Now, how do I actually want to play it? right? Do I want to play the victim? Do I want to play the hero? Do I want to play the like ascended master? Like this isn't actually happened. None of this is real, so it doesn't matter, right? However you want to do it. It's your choice because you paid the ticket. So in this story then, the hunter is a symbol of a part of you. The python is a symbol of a part of you. The lower realm entirely is a symbol of a realm within you. The daughter, the mirror, the ancestor, the white man also is a symbol of a part of you. All different parts of your own inner self. So right at the beginning, what do we find as the lights, as the sort of curtain rises, right? There is a stalemate, a python locked in battle with the antelope, both in complete stasis, right? And, do we have times in our life where we feel like we are completely stuck, right? It's not that we're powerless. It's that we have a python in us that is fearsome and powerful, and we have an antelope in us that is like the king of the antelope and super powerful, and they are in complete deadlocked stalemate. Okay. Now, we've touched on these themes when we talk about grief, when we talk about circumambulation in past sessions, and we do this practically, especially recently, every week when we do our weekly private live group advising sessions. And the theme is that when you realize you are in stalemate, the trick is to sit there and don't run away, but hold space for it. Hold space for it. Right? I mean, basically, just like you're doing now in sacred space. You hold space for it. You don't try to intervene immediately necessarily. You don't numb it. You don't run away. You don't stuff it down. Right? But if you sit there long enough, typically in grief, in itching pain, okay, discomfort, when you sit there long enough, a third thing will emerge spontaneously. Right? And this third thing emerges because of the discomfort of sitting with an intractable, impossible situation without numbing it. When you sit there long enough, a third thing will emerge. Right? So it's not A or B, because A or B are like completely deadlocked. A third thing emerges. Right? The price of the ticket, the price of having the privilege of buying the ticket to even come into this world, is that if you want to sort of move forward, you have to be able to sit with the uncomfortable stuff and not just run. I mean, if you want to run, you can run. It's a choice. These are just the physics. Okay, this is just your menu of options. I mean, just on the idea of sitting with something in discomfort, we can do a whole talk on this, but I will spare you. And so they sit here, they're stuck, and they sit there long enough such that the third thing that emerges is the hunter. Is the hunter, right? You finally come to realize, oh my gosh, I'm in this situation. And what side does he take, right? He takes the side of the python. Now, there are a couple of ways to read this, a couple of ways of, and they're all consistent, but I'll just give them really quickly. The python is the symbol, as you've heard me say countless times at this point. Snake is a symbol of the feminine. It is associated with the moon. It is the animal that goes through cycles of death and rebirth, just like the moon, because the snake is the only animal that sheds its skin, dies, leaves a corpse behind, and continues on and rebirths, right? It is a chthonic character, so it is chthonic means of the underground, of the night. It goes underground into its underground realm, as the story sort of demonstrates. And there's just this feeling of continuous circumambulation and renewal. Right? The classical symbol of the renewal and regenerative aspect of the serpent comes in the form of the Ouroboros. The Ouroboros, which is basically a snake curled around in a circle, biting and consuming its own tail. So it gives birth to the tail and consumes its own tail at the same time. It's basically life feeding on itself, which is what life is. Okay. The Greeks, the original sort of, I think, not even a Titan, like pre-Titan, actually, I think it was the Titan, Okeanos, right? Ocean, Okeanos, was a giant snake that circled the entire known world. Like at the horizon would be Okeanos if you sail far enough. And it's like this river that surrounds the world and bounds it. And he bites and consumes his own tail. So he takes the side of the python and goes down, right? Down into grief, down into the chthonic. He does not take the side of the antelope, who is diurnal of the day, grazes by the day, and everything is straightforward. He's on above land. It's flat pasture. There's no jungle. There's no hills. Everything is love and light, right? Everything is love and light. And the herds travel in straight lines. And the python is circumambulatory, cunning, chthonic, and of the underworld. And right there, right, he just chooses to go down, which is, generally speaking, the right answer, right? Because it's, clearly he seems to get punished by going down, but the way you advance, right, the way you go through and upwards, is to go downward. One way of thinking about this is, for the tree to grow higher, the roots need to go down further. Right? Because if you're not deep enough and you keep going over high, the tree will just fall over with the next strong wind. Okay. So that's one level, and then the other level is, and this is consistent with the chthonic and solar diurnal, is in the way they engage with you. Right? The antelope says, "Woe is me! I wasn't doing anything. I was following. I was meditating. I was eating organic. I was doing everything right." Which means, under a control schema, I assume that as long as I do everything right, I should, and I'm entitled to, a good life. And that is, the rules and regulations, law and order world of the solar. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only mistake is to think that is the full description of reality. And obviously he's in locked life and death battle with a python. The story told by the antelope is clearly not the whole story. Perhaps not even half the story. But that's just my own bias. Right. So the antelope is like, "Woe is me. I'm an innocent victim," and says, "You should help me because you should. I haven't done anything wrong. I just deserve to be helped." Right. And the hunter is like, "Okay. And what do you have to say?" And the python says, and for those of you who've been following the fairy tales I've been saying, the python says, "Let's make a deal. Let's make a deal." Right? What are the rules of going down into the fairy tale world that we've gone through again and again and again here? It's make a deal, right? And act in good faith. Act in good faith. Right? Make a deal and don't go back on your deals. Okay? But don't be afraid to make deals. Because it is this sense of initiation, adulthood, the difference between a boy and a man, the difference between a man and a king, right? Where you walk through the world with a certain kind of dignity, where you belong there, and therefore you have, right, the authority and the power to deal and make deals. And if you make a good deal, that's fine. If you make a bad deal, that's on you, right? You're not an innocent victim. And the antelope is like, "I was doing everything right. I shouldn't be eaten by the snake. This is wrong." Right? And the python says, "Let's make a deal." And so he chooses the path of let's make a deal, which is the path that will tend to happen. You make a deal and you go down. Okay. The python says, "I'll reward you. Let's make a deal." He takes that deal. And the antelope, as he dies, says, "The reward will be your ending." Neither of them is wrong, right? But the antelope has this kind of negative accent where you could also just as well say, "Look, we're all dead anyway," right? And the path of the python gave me this life of richness. And then I died instead of this life of, sort of mediocrity and victimhood before I died, right? So it's like the antelope is like, "I told you so." And it's like, well, what you said was right. The reward was my undoing, quote unquote, but I don't know that you told me so, right? If I knew in the beginning, I might have still taken that path. Just because it's your path doesn't mean it's my path, right? So neither of them is wrong per se. Both are right in their own way. And both are equally valid parts of you. That's why there's a stalemate in the first place, right? So anyway, in this story, he picks the path of the chthonic, grabs the tail of the snake and goes down. Down, 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 down. A side very interesting, I mean, this is why this tale is so rich. An interesting side detail is that he has to wait for the new moon when it is darkest in order to fully go down. All these little details. The fact that, his ancestor is in a rush basket carried with him everywhere, instead of he needs to travel to this temple to like consult the oracle at Delphi or whatever, right? Go to the fortune teller. It's like, no, your ancestor is always with you, right, on the path of your life. So all these little details we could spend, we could do a whole weekend retreat on just a story like this. But anyway, they go down only when the moon herself, when the upper snake, serpent goddess herself is underground, right? And so there's a symbol then of being in the cocoon. When we talk about transformation, we talk about caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly. And the new moon being in the cocoon, right? Because the new moon dies for 3 days every month before it rebirths again as the new moon. And then here, you go down into the cocoon phase, this phase of transformation during this part. So all the symbols are aligned. It's like a neon sign saying this is the part of the story we're going in. So in the cocoon phase, you go down even further. In the Python world, this world underground is to me a reflection of things that happen to you when you're in the cocoon phase, when you're in the cooking pot, when you're in pandemic for a year, in the cooking pot of pressure and containment, right? For those of you who have done healing with me, 7-day healing with me, this is the world of the lost board member, right? When I say jokingly, you're going to go down to the lowest level of Guantanamo prison and interview the lost board member, this is where you go. This Python world is where you go. Down, down, down for days, and then down, down, down even more, right? So this is not a lofty, love and light, spiritual, intellectual, abstract realm, but this is down into the dark, scary underworld, down below even the level of the rats, cockroaches, and earthworms, down below that. When you go down far enough, and it takes perseverance, right, for the hunter to not let go of the tail, right? These little details that they don't have a lot of fanfare around. It's like, obviously, you made the deal. You're not going to let go of the tail. Okay, cool. But when you go down far enough, below everything else, what you find there is its own kingdom. This is within you. This is the darkest, deepest part of you, is a kingdom with roofs of gold. Even the dust is gold, right? And gold is a symbol of insight. Not wealth per se, although wealth can come from insight, right? But gold itself is a symbol of insight, abundance, and power. Now, this is the most, as Gary said, this is the part that really hit me very deeply as well. Now, this curious thing happens when he is down there. He consults his ancestor, who is a wasp, right? Who is also this insect, kind of chthonic, kind of a wasp, like burrows down underground to make its nest, or sort of like infects a tree, and like, there's this huge gall on the side of a tree out of which the wasps come in and out. So this wasp has the power of flight, right? So it's spirituality. It is of the air realm, but it also has the power of force. He can sting, and also has manifold power. So it's not just one wasp. The whole nest can come out and come after you in a fight, right? And I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, as opposed to a honeybee, the wasp doesn't give honey or any of this sweet talk nectar, right? This wasp, this old ancestor is just an old battle axe of an ancestor. And rightfully so, rightfully so. So the whole thing he goes through, asking for the mirror, consulting the ancestor. And so I want to pause here and spend a little bit of time on the key symbols here. The ancestor, the wasp, and the mirror, this mirror, okay? Now, we've had talks in the past about ancestors, what is the meaning of ancestors, and I think Gary is going to put a link up to that in case you all want to sort of access that for your reference later. But a fascinating thing here, which I totally love, is he stops to consult his ancestor on what he should ask for, right? And this was shocking to me, right? She said, when she was reading the story to me, she said wasp, and I was like, excuse me, what did you say? She says wasp, like the flying, stinging thing. I was like, wasp, really? It's like, what? And it was this fascinating thing, this inflection of the African tradition, where when presented, right, with large questions, where you have all the power in the world, you can wish for anything, right? The first question that comes up is to have the presence of mind, the mindfulness, if you will, to consult your ancestor, right? To consult your ancestor. And we'll talk a little bit more in the exercise about what your ancestor really is. So you can ask for anything. And the first thing you do is, I want to talk to my ancestor to ask. And this makes sense because, I guess, think of it this way. You've gone down into healing. You're not afraid. You're ready to do battle with anyone, even a python if necessary, right? And you're doing deals with the python within you, okay? And it takes you down into this realm of riches and says you can have anything. So basically, you've done all this stuff. You cleared all these boundaries and healed all these wounds in your life, okay? And then the question comes before you. And this is the key question that transitions you from healing to bliss, right? And then you're in bliss for a while, and then you go back to healing, and then back again. But on the cusp from healing to bliss, the question is, if you've healed these wounds, these childhood wounds of trauma, of abuse, of everything, and you've come into reconciliation with the parts you lost as a result of those traumas, through no fault of your own, and you went down and you got them back anyway. Now that you have that, all the powers of your life, of your inner self, are arrayed around you, looking to you, ready for your nod as to what you're gonna do next. And the question is, what do you tell them? What vision and meaning and purpose of your life do you set for yourself now that you're fully aligned within yourself? Right? That is the question. And so the corollary question is, how do you even go about answering that? And the answer here is to talk to your ancestors. An ancestor is a thing within you, part of you, mythopoetically, that you have lost, a grievous loss. So it doesn't have to be a kinsman or a kinswoman. It could be a job loss. It could be an illness that you've suffered. It could be a relationship that you've lost, right? So this part of you that you've lost, and which in addition you have grieved fully. And I won't talk all about what does it mean to grieve, how do you grieve? That's a larger question that I've actually covered in past talks. But when you grieve an ancestor fully, the loss reaches the other shore of the land of the ancestors, right? Depending on the cultural tradition you consult. But the grief is what makes the loss reach the other shore and then transform into an ancestor. And then this ancestor turns around and bestows many things, but the three main things are wisdom and guidance, protection, and a sense of identity. You know who you are because of your ancestors. Okay. And this is why ancestors are important. And here, at the cusp of trying to figure out what we do with the rest of our lives, the first move given from this story, right? That's not always the first move, but these are the physics. That's what Gopani Kufa decided, and then you can decide for yourself. Do I make that move? Do I make a different move? There is no like allegorical. The moral of the story is always consult your ancestors. You make your own decision. Okay. But this is what he does. First touch on the ball, consult my ancestor. And he says, go get the magic mirror, and he does. Okay. Now, an interesting side question that comes up is, what would have happened if the hunter had consulted the ancestor at the point of stalemate? If he brought out the wasp earlier and said, okay, there's a python, there's an antelope, what do? Do I just keep on walking? Do I kill the python? Do I kill the antelope? Do I try to sort of, kind of facilitate a reconciliation here? What do I do? Right. And the thing is, because the story is told this way, we will never know what would have happened. But that's in this story. In your own story, the next time you hit a stalemate, you could try it. You could try it. Right. When you're at a point in your life where there is an irresistible force that has come up against an immovable object in the orbit and constellation of your life, you could consult your ancestor and see what it tells you. But you don't have to. In this case, he didn't, and he went down. Okay. So then in the underworld, he consults the ancestor, and in return for consulting the ancestor, acquires the power of, I kid you not, reflection. The mirror is a symbol, obviously, of the power of reflection. And the power of reflection is the thing that gives you the ability to wish for anything. Right? Mind you, it's not a jewel. It's not a genie in a magic lamp. It's not a little bird. It's not a vial of magic potion. It's not a rock. It's not a feather. All of these alternative symbols would be significant if they were here. In this case, it is specifically a mirror, and it has its own significance. The thing that can give you anything you want is the power of reflection. Even out in the wild internet, when people are selling manifestation programs, right? They say, well, just keep saying over and over again what you want. I mean, it's a blunt instrument, but it can work in certain circumstances, I'm sure, right? But the trick to all of these is, if you're going to say what you want and do all these affirmations around what you want, you have to know what you want, right? And to do that, you need to go into a reflection, like a lot of reflection. And there are all these sort of trial and error missteps where it's like the first thing you ask for is like, I'd like more money. I'd like a car. And, the genie in the bottle is like, really? Like let me make sure you got, you can ask for anything, right? Like the world is on fire. There's 7 billion people with like all these problems, and you want a car. Okay. We'll get you that. That's fine. Let's like keep going and see, he's like crossing his fingers, hoping you like kind of see the even larger picture, right? If you want, only if you want to. So anyway, he asks 3 times, and we talked about the meaning of the number 3 and completion and cyclicality. And then finally, after the 3rd request, he gets it. He gains the power of reflection. He goes back up to the upper world, zoop, zoop. And he does okay for a while, right? He does okay for a while. Because right off the bat, he asks the ancestor, what should I wish for? What should I wish for? And the ancestor, very interestingly, reflects back to him and says, not the answer, but a question. And he says, wouldn't you like to be as rich and powerful as the python? And this, to me, is the crux of the story. When faced with this question, he does not reply. He does not reflect. He simply smiles and uses the power of reflection to wish for that. And this is the critical juncture of the story and of life itself. So what I mean by this is, when you have this superpower to get you anything, right? You actually go through the motions of asking your ancestor, what should I do? What is my highest meaning and purpose in life? And the very, very subtle insight of the story, which most people never even get to, is that the first couple times you do that, you do it half-baked. You don't go all the way through. Right? We see this in our healing practice all the time. People finally, after all this work and tears and swearing, right, find the deepest part of themselves, the source of all their creativity. And then they even talk to it. They develop a relationship with it, and they ask it questions. And then this deep part of you, right, the lost board member, the sensitive part of you, the minotaur who's actually a stereon, your muse, right, all these different ways of naming it. This part of you will say, because this part is not your authority, it's your brainstorm partner. And this part of you say, well, I mean, I guess usually you would ask to like have a new car, and you're like, okay, good, car. And you go off and you ask, and they're like, what? And you just go. You just go. Right? They don't stick around to spend more time to even go deeper. And this is its own kind of, I mean, not punishment, it's just the physics of it. Right? I mean, what I'm saying is those of us who are there with the ancestor, with this deepest part of us, just to get the answer, will often come away with the wrong answer. Those of us who are hanging out with the ancestors for the sake of hanging out with the ancestors will not be uncomfortable. They'll be comfortable hanging out. They'll actually stay too long. Right? The ancestors will say, well, you know, I guess someone would, in your position, might ask for a new car. And you're like, yeah, I guess. Well, what else? What else do you think? Right? They'll just keep saying, tell me more, tell me more. Why is that? Like an annoying little grandchild where it's like, tell me more. Why is the sky blue? Why? And then finally, you draw all of this deep, deep wisdom, which gives you wisdom and guidance, protection, and a sense of identity. Right? The car is not your identity. I hate to tell you. Right? And then finally, the ancestor's like, all right, it's time to get going. You got enough. And you're like, tell me more. It's like, just go circumambulate it a little more, and then come back. Right? I'll have dinner ready for you when you get back. Okay. So to get the most complete answer, you stay with the ancestors, which is why this detail of the ancestor always being with you, but not buzzing in your ear the whole time. You still have your own sovereignty and agency. You still, even though he's always with you, you still need to pull him out to ask. They don't answer unless you actually ask. Okay. So one key kind of pro tip here is after all this work, you've made it down to the lowest level of Guantanamo prison, stick around. So I know the food is awful and it smells funky down there, but stick around. It's worth it. It's worth it to spend time down there and not be afraid. Right? The underworld is as much you as the village up above, is as much you as all the angels up above. These are all you. Right? And right, a true sovereign will claim comfort and dominion in all three realms, just like Persephone from last week. Right? And you'll summer down below, and you'll like go up and down as you please. Okay. Because think about this, just like with the python and antelope, what would have happened, right, if the hunter had stayed and said, well, yeah, I mean, part of me would like to be as powerful a king as the python, but what else do you think? What else do you think? And the ancestor will be like, oh, okay, well, I don't know. I mean, you could do this, you could do that, right? What other answer would he have gotten? And the answer is, we will never know. We will never know. We will never know because he didn't ask. But just like with the antelope and the python, when you are in that situation next, right, when you can do anything, you will perhaps remember to ask. Only if you want. Only if you want. And my point is, I'm not reading this allegorically. when he doesn't ask, these are not mistakes. These are the things that happen in circumambulation. Most of us don't even go down there. We're terrified. It's like the snake. No, kill it. Spray it with like snake killer pesticide or whatever, right? So the fact that he even made it all the way down there is incredible. It's amazing. And then you're down there, and then you forget to stay. You forget to ask in different situations. You come back up. You can have anything you want. You forget to ask more deeply. So this is how it happens. Even when we do remember to ask the ancestor, we don't do a complete job of it. And this is not a mistake. This is part of the pattern. So he says, wouldn't you like to be as powerful a king as the python? This is a question. It's almost a test, right? It's not an advice. It's not a recommendation. But right away, then he wishes for it, right? And right away, you're just like, why would he even want that? Why would anyone want to be chief of a village? Right? You're like sitting on the throne all day, sitting target, sitting duck of a target. And you're just signing papers and decrees all day. Right? So basically, he wishes for the car, right? He wishes for wealth and prestige. And then the door closes on the trap door to go down. And he continues on his regular circumambulation. And eventually he loses the mirror to the next round, which we'll get to. But again, none of this is a warning. None of this is a mistake. This is just how circumambulation works. You see something very similar in the Odyssey, right? So in the Odyssey, in Homer's Odyssey, in the episode where they arrive at the island of Helios, right, where his cattle, his immortal cattle, are grazing. The key injunction, I think it was Circe who told, because Circe, who is the daughter of Helios, was like, okay, you're going to hit this island. I think it was actually Calypso that warned him. You're going to hit this island. There's going to be these huge, ginormous, delicious cattle. And all you have to do is not eat the cattle, right? I mean, for crying out loud, don't even land the boats, just like keep sailing. Because if you eat the cattle, the sun god will be pissed, and you don't want that. You're trying to get home. And so what happens, of course, is they get there, they're out of food, the men land the ships, and Odysseus says, do not eat the cattle. And they say, okay. And then Odysseus, as always happens with the alien bag of winds and everything else, he falls asleep, and then the men go ahead and eat the cattle anyway. Right? He wakes up, he's like horrified. He doesn't eat the cattle. He's like, you chuckleheads, what are you doing? And they're like, hey, we have a rightful complaint. We've been here for like 2 months without enough food, right? We're starving. It's like, we can't sail because there's no wind, and we're going to die here. So if we're going to die anyway, we may as well eat some cattle. And he was like, oh my God, okay. So then Helios complains to Zeus. There's all these thunderbolts that come down. All the men die except Odysseus, who didn't eat the cows because he was asleep. Odysseus alone survives. So the classical symbol of the Helios, of the Helian cattle, is that when you, because this is like the back half of the Odyssey, right? He's gone through a lot of circumambulation at this point. He's even been to the underworld, right? At this point, you are basically at the center of the labyrinth. The trapdoor is right there, right? The sun, right? The sun god Helios, the sun in the sky is the ultimate trapdoor that happens to go upwards. There are trapdoors that go downward. They all connect on the back end, right? It's a ribbon. It's a loop. So the sun, for those of you who have taken clarity meditation program, the sun is the center of the Bhava chakra wheel, the center of the labyrinth. And the key sort of pattern here is, if you want to make it all the way through the center of the wheel and not be, buffeted by the winds of fortune, good fortune and bad fortune, right? Like we talked about the Deva and the Ashura and Manu, and all the rest of it. If you want to make it through the sun door, at the cusp of going through, you cannot let the demands of the profane, hunger for cattle, fear, threat, control, economic concerns, at the cusp of the sun door, you have to stay in the sacred. You cannot let the edicts of the profane take over. If you do, the sun door will close. You'll eat the cattle, the sun door will close, and you will continue circumambulating around the Mediterranean. Now, this is not a warning or a punishment. For us, anyway, this is a good thing. Because if Odysseus had gone through enlightenment and gone through the sun door, we would never have the Odyssey in our grasp as like a cornerstone of our civilization, right? We would not have had all these stories, right? So anyway, thank goodness not everyone is enlightened and they sort of drift away, and some of them actually stick around, right? Okay. So then, in a similar way, this happens when Gopani Kufa loses the mirror. So now he wishes to be the king. He becomes head of state. Now, the interesting thing here, while he is king for many, many decades until his hair begins to gray, he does two things. Number one, he does not consult the ancestor. Ding, ding, ding. Not to be allegorical or fear, thought, or control. I mean, what happens to him is not bad in the end, right? He does not consult the ancestor. And two, he does not use the frigging mirror. Okay. And when I talk to people about bliss, they stop short. Right? They stop short. They're happy with the new car. They're happy manifesting $25. It's like, oh my gosh, I manifested a nice car, $25. And they don't go any further than that. It's like you've got your wealth and prestige. You're the king. Everyone's bowing down to you. And you're fine with that, right? You have no curiosity what's over the horizon. You have other villages that may be starving around you. You're like, you're okay with your own $25. And it's like, so you have this power where you can wish for anything. World peace, the ending of global climate change, right? The ending of the pandemic, right? And don't say, no, oh, that's not me. I'm not that powerful. It's like, that's the antelope talking. That's the antelope talking. You wish for anything and you're happy sitting in your throne, signing like policy papers all day. So it's like, if that's the way you got to do it, that's the way you got to do it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the sun door closes and you continue circumambulating. And then the next Gopani Kufa comes and takes the mirror from you, which is the white man. Right? And I'll get to that in a minute. So this is not allegorical, right? So I'm not saying, so, you get to this point and it's like, come on, you dumb slob. Where is your vision? Where is your sense of grandiosity? You got to think bigger. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying everyone does that. They stop short not because they're dunderheads, but because this is the pattern, right? Odysseus failed. So what do you expect from the rest of us? If even Odysseus failed, it's like, what are we going to do, right? So I'm not like doing this to you. I'm like, no, this is the pattern. When you do it and then you realize you did it, you're like, crap. But then the next thing is like, oh, this is the pattern. And you can still fight it. You play it however you want. I'm just giving you the pattern. I'm not telling you what you should do. Here, the ancestor asks you a question, and then you just go off half-cocked and do it. And you go on a path, and it continues your circumambulation. This is why people like, friends, extended family, they'll sometimes ask me, we'll be at a barbecue and they'll pull me aside and like, so how did you do this? How did you start your companies? How did you get into Harvard? And it's like very hard to engage in a conversation like that. Because I don't know how to explain it in this cause and effect profane. For me, like the point wasn't to get into a certain school or start a certain company. It's just this larger feeling of like just following a certain feeling within me. And the feeling itself may not be the ideal or correct, right? It's just hard to explain. It's like standing in a vineyard, right? And a friend says, where did this grape come from? And it's like, how do I even answer that question? right? Do I say like, oh, the team planted it here like 4 months ago, and that's where the grape is? That's technically true, but it's not really, like a fully honoring answer. It's like I'd have to go into the history of the land, the soil, the water, the history of grapes itself, talking about Dionysus even, right? I don't even know where to begin, right? It's the beauty of life itself. Like, it's too vast. So at a party, when someone asks me, it's like, how did you start your first company? I mean, I'll tell them a bit of a story. But just like Gopani Kufa, they don't ask. They just take it and they're like, okay, great. So I'll, maybe I'll work on my business plan and I can send it to you and you can take. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. I'll look. I've been out of the game for a while, but I'll look at it. But they don't stop for longer and ask any further questions. Like, for instance, I mean, in my case with starting companies, right? A very interesting question would be, would you do it again? It's like, obviously, I'm not a high-tech person anymore, right? Another following question might be like, did you like it? Did you like it? Would you do it again? Right. So I only explain the question they asked, and they run off and they start their own company. Nothing wrong with that. But that is the pattern. That is the pattern. And so now here, with the white men coming in, these white men are also a part of your own inner self. Okay, the allegorical reading, the sort of cultural reading is to say, oh, the evil white man took away our mirror and now he's using it to like rain down lightning bolts on us and woe is me. Again, who does that sound like? That's the antelope talking. That's the antelope talking. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just these are all us. We talk out of different characters all the time. Right? So it's funny because there's this asymmetry here where when the white man comes and takes the mirror, we take the position of Gopani Kufa and say, oh, woe is me, you took my mirror, right? You jerks. But when Gopani Kufa goes down and cunningly takes the mirror from the Python King, we say, hooray. We say, hooray. Right? In other words, he is the one who infiltrated the Python world. And when he takes the mirror, we're okay with it. We're not okay when the white man takes the mirror from Gopani Kufa. And the question is, why is that, right? Just like with the lost board member, for those of you who've done healing. We push down the lost board member. We're like, you're horrible. You're going to get me humiliated. No one's going to love me if I let this true part of myself up. And you push it down with this ruthlessness that, Judas himself would like recoil at. Okay, that's how hard we push down our lost board member. But then when at work, there's a jerk boss that's pushing us down in exactly the same way. We play the part of the antelope and we complain. We didn't do anything wrong. Right? So the way this works is, in the story, the white man comes in. He doesn't just infiltrate and steal the mirror. He comes in, he marries your daughter. Right? He marries your daughter, your emerging inner feminine. Right? So the cunning scoundrel of a white man is a valid version of you. And not only a valid version, he is he married your daughter. So he is the inner masculine married to the emerging inner feminine. He is the 2.0 version of you. He is the next circumambulation. Literally, he's your son-in-law. Right? And you're the king. You have this mirror. You can wish for anything. And you let this guy come in. You let this guy come in. Right? So there's all kinds of symbolism around the white man in this context of an African folktale. But the key thing to say here is that he is valid. Right? Gopani Kufa blessed the marriage. I'm sure they had a kick-in celebration and accepted it. Accepted this image, this part of you that is a trickster, a scoundrel, and soaked and marinated in the profane. Okay. You let him marry your daughter. He even sleeps in the bed where your mirror is. right? And when he takes it, you don't even realize he took it. Just like when Persephone disappeared, nobody even knew for a while. Why is that? Why is that? Well, we know a couple things, right? He doesn't use reflection very often. Now that he's gotten the car, he like tosses the mirror aside. He doesn't need it. I got what I wanted. I got mine. I don't care about yours. My view on the world is about this. Maybe after some like reflection, it's this. But after I get this, no, I don't want just the car. I want to be king of the whole village. Okay, zoop zoop, you're king of the whole village. Okay, I don't need to reflect anymore. I'm done. I'm done with this healing thing. I got everything I wanted. Nobody bothered me from now on. Right? Good luck with that. Good luck with that. So he doesn't reflect, and he doesn't consult his ancestor. Right? Perhaps only when all hell is breaking loose. So when you're in this, by the way, crappy, boring job of town administrator, right? You forget the power of reflection and you don't practice it, and you don't remember your ancestor, right? And this is the price of prestige. This is the price of prestige. So in this mode, an even more profane version of you, this white man, symbolically, comes in and makes off with your power of reflection so that you cannot use it even when you need it, and your own village is destroyed. And now the profane part of you has the power of your reflection and holds the world in the palm of their hand, right? And when you do reflect now, when you sit down and really sort of think about things, right? When you wish for your things, in sort of the modern Western world, when we sit and we do reflection, we don't wish for inner reconciliation. We don't wish for more insight. What do we wish for in our society? Let's just list a better job, more pay, better house, nicer car, right? That's the focus of the profane. Or it's like if I'm stressed or whatever, I focus on curing, not healing, right? I'll do this meditation thing, and it's like this meditation thing isn't working. So what's the next thing, right? I'll eat differently. You're always trying to find the lever to pull to get this voice inside of you to shut up. And the voice, most of the time, is the buzzing voice of your ancestor. Right? So then you'll take a pill and nuke everything. Now, again, this is not medical, right? It's just like metaphorically. The sort of accent, the bias is on control, not reconciliation, i.e. fear, threat, and control, right? Not reconciliation, nurturing, devoid of fear, threat, and control. As we said a couple sessions ago, the focus is on curing, which is fine, not healing. Not healing. Okay. So again, to describe this is not to finger wag and threaten you in turn and say, you got to meditate more, you got to be more mindful. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying this is the pattern. Right? We all do this. I do this. This is the thing that keeps the world turning and circumambulation going. And to make that point even further, let's not all dump on the white man here. Let's go back a couple of rounds of circumambulation back into the Python world, right? So let's look at it from let's take all of this insight we've taken and go back and look at the original position of the Python world. So you've got this Python king. He's got this mirror. He can wish for anything. There's all these riches, crops, fish, gold, cattle. So given all that, what is this king even doing going into the upper world to do battle with an antelope, right? He's got plenty of antelope down there. He has to go up, and he does this battle, and he gets stuck in stalemate. And as a result of that, he ends up losing his mirror, right? And Gobani Kufa is the white man of the upper world that takes the mirror up, right? That first kind of misstep or circumambulation pitches us into levels more and more and more profane. And symbolically, not allegorically, symbolically, none of this is an error. This is the pattern. We always forget to reflect more, and we get into trouble. So the insight here is that you will lose your mirror. and there will be circumambulation, just as natural as the blood will flow through your body. And if it stops flowing, you're dead, right? And the insight to take here then, for me anyway, is that all along the way of circumambulation, there are levers you can pull, right? Pressure points you can push to optimize and tune the flavor profile as you would like, right? So, and when I talk about pushing these levers, I'm not talking about pushing to control or to cure or to avoid disaster. It's like Gopani Kufa lived a good life. He had a daughter, he had progeny, he had like name, he had everything. So the mirror was a blessing. And then the mirror also led to his destruction, but frankly, only because he didn't use it enough, right? He stopped short. Once again, he stopped short. He stopped short when the ancestor asked him, and then even when he got his nice car and house and pretty life that everybody envied, he stopped short of that. And so the point here is he didn't make any mistakes, actually. He lived a good long life, and then he died, and that's kind of what most of us wish for. And that's okay. That's okay. Most of us don't go through the sun door. There's not a lot behind there, right? I mean, there is and there isn't. And it's like if you came and paid to sit in the movie theater, why would you leave early? Right? I mean, some of us choose to, but those are extraordinary circumstances. And some people pay just to see if they could sneak out of the theater, just for fun, just for delight, right? And all of that's okay. So there are levers. So there's nothing wrong to fix here, but as you go through this circumambulation, there are levers you can pull just because they're fun, just because they change the flavor profile in these very, very delightful ways. And so one of the levers to pull is to sit with your ancestors. Sit with your ancestors. They could be actual ancestors in your clan, grandparents, great-grandparents who have passed on. They can also be intellectual, mythopoetic ancestors. Like I teach bliss in the tradition of, say, Joseph Campbell, right? I like think about healing through a somewhat Jungian lens, but like flavored by like von Franz, right? So your bliss ancestors, your mythopoetic ancestors. Or it could be ancestors that are parts of you that are no longer here, a relationship that I had in earlier life that is no longer there, and that I have grieved, right? Jobs that I have lost, failures I've had, identities that I've had that have come and gone. And the key to an ancestor, again, is to grieve it, right? Loss and no grief is not an ancestor, right? Grief is what turns loss into an ancestor. Grief is what turns just a write-off loss into a sacrifice, right? There's a world of difference. It's night and day, the difference between a loss and a sacrifice. Grief turns loss into sacrifice and turns your losses into ancestors, which then give you wisdom and guidance, protection, and a sense of identity. Only grief transforms things in your life into ancestors and brings you this abundance, this golden world, right, with the golden rooftops and everything of guidance, protection, wisdom, and identity. So when you say sit with your ancestors, when I say sit with your ancestors more, I mean not as a you better do this or else you'll have disaster. It's not like that at all. It's like you're fine as you are. And then just out of pure delight, I want to add a little bit more salt into the stew. I want to add a little bit more red pepper into the stew to enhance the flavor profile. And the flavor I want to bring out more is the flavor and presence of the ancestors. I want to sit with the wasp even longer, not to get something and extract something out of it so I can go get my next like car, right? But I just want to sit with the ancestor to hang out, right? Why do I want a little bit more hot pepper, right? And the sort of current modern wellness company will be, well, wellness culture will be like, well, it's good for you. It reduces inflammation. It's like, well, I mean, that's a fine answer. That's more of a controlling answer. But the more delightful answer is like, I just like the taste of hot pepper. It delights me, right? That's why I'm adding it in. And I pay money. I pay ego power for that. That's okay, right? The point of everything ultimately is delight. And so when you realize you want to do the different reasons you can do things, right? You realize you're like, why is it more interesting and delightful to be king and dealing with all these affairs of state all day than to be sitting on the bank of a river with a wasp, right? That's the part I don't get, right? The wasp brings you the power of reflection. You sit longer, and then you gain the insight of what to do with this power of reflection. If you reflect long enough, deep enough, you will be enlightened. You will go through the sun door. You will stumble into it when you're not looking. When you wander out through the palace of delight and you like fall into a hole in the ground and you realize you've gone through the sun door. But again, out of delight, not because you're supposed to enlighten, right? Not out of fear, threat, and control. This is why when people talk about enlightenment, they're like, you can't get there when you're looking for it. You can't try to be enlightened. And the only reason for that is because you're like this: fear, threat, and control, right? I have to have this peak experience, and you will not have it. Not because you're a bad person, but because you can't do it when you're like this. You can only do it in this realm of the sacred. And this is also kind of why, I mean, in certain religions, like in certain Buddhist traditions, they have this thing called the bodhisattva, right? We're like, oh my gosh, look how wonderful they are. They reached enlightenment, but then they held back. And they said, we're not going to reach enlightenment until everyone reaches enlightenment. And they go back with this burden and continue being living beings trying to help everyone else enlighten. Right? But the thing is, they don't come back out of obligation. Right? They come back out of delight. Right? Because the thing is, when the bodhisattva or anyone makes a vow to like enlighten all living beings, it's like, you can't do that. It's impossible. It's like, we set this up, right, so that we could be these living beings forever in the rounds of like samsara. Right? And the thing is, the bodhisattvas know that. And they make this vow anyway, because that is the delightful thing. Right? The house burns forever so that we can put water on it forever. This is the round, right? This is the round. And you can leave it. You can leave the movie theater anytime, go through the sun door. There are certain rules and physics around how to do that. But the deeper question of like, it's just like the car. It's like, oh, how do I go through the sun door? Well, you could do it by this. And you're like, okay, go, and you go. But it's like, you're not asking the deeper question, which is, if it's possible to leave, then why did we end up here in the first place? Obviously, we chose to be here. We chose to be here. I mean, all of us, not just the bodhisattvas. They're just like the cheerleading squad. and a wonderful cheerleading squad at that. Right? So you have two flavor profiles here in the story that are delightful. One is sitting with the ancestors, and two is sitting longer with the power of reflection. Right? And these two profiles, like salty, sweet, slightly bitter, roasted raspberry, truffly flavor notes, right? These are all flavor notes you can add if you like, only if you want, right? No pressure, no fear, threat, or control. And to see if you like what the flavors do to you, to give you things out of desire and delight and things beyond that. So again, none of this is anything you have to do. But these are things that could be delightful, and you can try them. And if they delight you, you can do them if you want. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's all the notes I had. Gary, do you have anything else to add or any thoughts to share? Hello.
Hi, Artie.
Hi.
That was really powerful, and to have this clarity. Right, that when you are in regular consultation with your ancestors, the three things that you get is, guidance, protection, and a sense of identity. So to kind of know that and to have that clarity is really good. So thank you so much for that. And I think personally for me, I would ponder on the aspect of protection a lot more, because while consulting an ancestor, you know that they give guidance and you ask for it, and it also kind of you feel stronger and stronger about who you are and your sense of purpose, and the meaning of your life and the meaning of what you want to do. So that kind of forms a stronger sense of identity. But protection is something that I hadn't seriously considered. So so thank you for that. I think I will have to reflect more on that. So that's what I took away from what you were saying.
Nice one. Well done. What else? Anything else? I think I'm losing your connection here. Okay, so come on and share more if you want. But in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll go into our exercise. So the exercise we came up with, oh yeah, I lost her. Oh, there she is. Hi.
Hi, sorry, Artie. I mean, my screen just refreshed by itself. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. My only question was, no, we caught everything, I think.
Right, right.
The only thing was anything else to add before I go into the exercise?
No, I would love to kind of get into the reflection exercise and think about what to think over the week. So please do share the exercise.
Okay. So I'll do that. Actually, one other thing to add here for me is, so for Sacred Space, we're in our 56th week. We've been doing these for over a year now. I mean, my wild ass intuition is to just keep going. But I think something that would be helpful for us is to hear from you in terms of, after a year of these sessions, like, what do you like? What do you not like? We're thinking about how we manage the content going forward, because it's getting a little bit unwieldy. Whether you would like to see it continue, what themes, what directions you might sort of come to you as being potentially delightful. No promises. We're just kind of following our muses here. But yeah, if you like this and you feel so moved, only if you want, send us a note and just let us know how it's going and what things are coming to you, right? What things are coming to you. Okay. So for the exercise, so the exercise is this. And the way to do these exercises is, well, first of all, in keeping with the fourth principle of proceeding in sacred space, no expectation of participation. Do this only if you want. There will not be a quiz. It's just, it's just a suggestion for you to do only if you want. And if you would like to do this exercise, the way you would do it is you would grab some pen and paper, get some quiet time alone for 5 or 10 minutes in your home or in your car if your home is like, kind of a zoo. Like for instance, when you're driving to the grocery store to get groceries, when you park your car, you can just sit in your car an extra 5 or 10 minutes and then do the exercise. It's only 5 or 10 minutes. No one will miss you. And then kind of get the nourishment from that. Where to send a note. So if you're on email with me, if you've gotten email updates from this, just hit reply. I'll see it. And I think Gary can put my email address on here as well, if you want. So the exercise for this session is with the pen and paper to ask yourself and reflect on, what is something you have grieved in your life? Okay. And to be specific, the last time or any time you had a failure, you had a setback, you had a loss that was painful, you miss it, right? You're like, if I had to do it over again, this would not have happened. Okay. Not just that, because we all have that. The last time you had that and you actually grieved it. You actually grieved it. In the older sessions, we'll go into like how to, well, basic thumbnails of how to grieve. Right? You sat with it without running away, without numbing it. and you sat in the cooking pot of pressure and containment, and you let whatever happened to you happen. You let it change you. You let it change how you think about the world. You let it change how you lead your life. Okay. So what is something that you have grieved in your life? And the exercise is to go back and let it give you another hit, another dose of wisdom and guidance and identity. Now, just as a side note here, if you feel like, gosh, I really haven't, I have had losses, but I haven't actually taken time to grieve them, then that would be the actual, I mean, this is a bigger task, but that would be the actual exercise to consider, right? And you can go back to the ancestor sessions that Gary, I think, has linked, to find the things that are ungrieved. And I would take it slow and take it one at a time and actually grieve them properly so that they transform into ancestors. So you have this resource within you. But if you do feel like you have this ancestral kind of like something I've lost and I grieved it, to the point where I do take wisdom, guidance, protection, and identity from it, then the exercise is you go back to them, even though you don't need to, even though, hell is not breaking loose all over the place. Everything's fine. You're doing okay. When you don't, just like if you're a grandmother, if you're a parent with older kids, right? And your kids call and your grandkids visit you and they don't need anything, right? They're not asking for money. They're not coming to do their laundry. It's rare enough, I know, because they are us too. We're all like this, right? But when that does happen once in a blue moon, there's just all this delight and blessing that just explodes in all directions. And even after that, it doesn't happen often enough. So then you do that. That's the exercise. Even though you don't need to go back to that ancestor, you go back anyway, just to sit with it, hold its hand, say hello, feel it buzzing around you for no good reason. For no good reason, right? Not out of need, not out of want, but out of delight and desire. To sit in reflection with that ancestor for no good reason. You have no question. I don't even have a question. I mean, I can make up questions, but I don't need to make up a reason to sit with you, who is this deep part of me, right? Like the ultimate sort of form of this, a myth like this would be for Gopani Kufa not only to like reflect, not only to spend time with the ancestor, but from time to time to wish himself to go back down into the realm of the pythons, to make sure everyone is like, why couldn't he can wish for anything? He can wish for anything. Why wouldn't he go down and wish for continued prosperity and then come up and then create prosperity in his land also? Doesn't even cross his mind. Why is that? Doesn't even cross our minds. Why is that? Okay. To sit in reflection with that ancestor for no good reason and just see what comes. And it'll say things to you. Wouldn't you like to be whatever? And don't run off and do it. Just stay with it. Well, what do you mean by that? Like, you could have done it. Why didn't you do it? Right? Why wouldn't you do it? Where's my trust fund? Right? You didn't do it. Why? Why not? And it's like, well, I didn't do it because whatever. There are more important things. And you go into that deeper level. Right? So that is the exercise. And, only if you want, and see what comes. See what comes. Okay. And now, so that's the end of our talk for the week. And now I'll go ahead and close our session. So our next session is this Sunday. It's free, open to the public. Please feel free to invite others. And I will go ahead and drop a link. Sign up now if you want, in the Crowdcast, and in the, where am I here? In the Facebook. Okay. And our session will be next Sunday at the same time. Okay. So I hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you. Thank you for holding this space with me and us and thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, and the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with us today. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great day. Have a great week. And I will see you all in the next session. Happy Sunday, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.